Welcome, friends. I'm joined today by Jake, who recently attended one of our mission trips. Jake, thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, thank you. It's my pleasure.
You know, one of these mission trip experiences can come along with all kinds of memories. One you happened to share with us was something that happened at Temple Square. I wonder if you'd be willing to share that story with our friends.
Yeah, of course. So the one of the days that we were there on the Utah trip, we went to Temple Square, kind of for two reasons. One, to learn about a little more about kind of Mormon culture, but also to evangelize to some of the sister missionaries that work there. So we had just gotten there and we were walking around, and I was thinking, okay, what can I do? What's a good way to strike up a conversation, and not just be like, oh, hey, so by the way, Jesus, and so I'm a biologist, and so I started noticing that all of the flowers in their landscaping were absolutely immaculate. Like nothing was wilted, nothing was even like dying. Everything was in bloom too, which struck me as very kind of odd because things don't all bloom at the same time. So eventually I thought, okay, this is what I'm going to talk about, because I know that Mormons have this kind of beehive imagery that's important to the state and to LDS culture. So I struck up that conversation, just about, hey, why is your garden so perfect? And so these two sister missionaries, they told me, they were like, well, yeah, they've got maintenance grounds crew out here every day. As soon as something starts to wilt, or if the petals fall off or stops looking good, they immediately tear it out and plant something fresh in its place. And that kind of struck me. I mean, John, you're a pastor, so I know it's not lost on you, the concept of taking something out when it looks bad, but not allowing it to bear fruit. And that's essentially what they're doing, because a lot of flowers, petals will fall off when it's, making its fruit, because now it's focused on growing the fruit. It doesn't need to attract bees, right? So the petals are going to fall off. It's going to put all its effort into making that fruit. So really what they're doing is they're, taking it out before fruit can be had. So
Heartbreaking, because it feels like you only belong unless you look perfect.
Correct. Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like to me. And so I had that thought, kind of jarred me a little bit. So we kept talking, and I asked them about the beehive imagery, because I was like, with all these blooming flowers, you got to be attracting bees. So they told me about how, industry and hard work is important in Mormon culture in the state of Utah. And a slogan that they have is, busy as bees, busy as a worker bee. And so here, I thought this was a really good opportunity to share. I was like, well, I am a biologist, and, that's a little bit of a tragic analogy, because, worker bees, they literally work themselves to death. They find nectar, they alert other bees about where it is, and they go back and forth until they basically run out of energy and die. And yeah, so it certainly struck me that these missionaries, it seemed to not bother them all that much. It's hard to know. Sometimes they put up a pretty good front, but.
So that concept of busy as bees came up. If I remember right, Jake, you mentioned that it came up also later in a conversation that day.
It did, yeah. So after that happened the first time, I thought, this is actually a really good conversational tool. I kind of want to keep using it. And later I met up with a couple other folks on the trip, and we all went to the top of their conference center. That very top, like that rooftop area, has got more almost like historical, like what the pioneers would have seen botanically. And so we thought, oh, that'd be super cool. Let's go up there. And so we got into a really good conversation with two sister missionaries up there. And so I was able to bring it up again, where I said, well, worker bees, actually, they work themselves literally to death. And this one of the missionaries, she puts her hands to her chest and she just goes, oh, they're such an inspiration to us all. And I was kind of heartbroken, because that's not exactly something that I would consider an inspiration. Like, I'm all for working hard and all that, but working yourself to death, that's not what, Jesus, that's not what Jesus said, right? Jesus said, it is finished. I've done it all. Now everything, all the work that you do is, out of thankfulness, out of this grace. And they just don't have that. They've got the exact opposite relationship.
Well, that really helps. I mean, the picture for them to say an inspiration to us all reminds me, I recently came across a friend who he was reading out of the New Testament, came across Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. He was so struck by that passage in that moment because he realized he did not know the God who provides rest. Just, wow, heartbreaking. We share a little bit about rest when we go door to door on these mission trips. Anything you would share with a Christian who is trying to reach out to a Mormon who is maybe in this mentality of work, 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 thinking it all depends on them?
Yeah. I think I've got, two things that helped me kind of as I was struggling with that a little bit. Was the first thing that I realized is, it's in God's hands, right? That's the first thing. And it's one thing to know that, it's another thing to be able to act on that in a way. It's like, because you still get to that door and your heart's pounding, or talking to a close friend and you're like, is this gonna mess the relationship up or what, and it gets daunting for sure. But honestly, the first time you do it, you kind of go, okay, I didn't die. I can do this. So I think just having the courage to take that first step, I think, is really important for someone reaching out to a Mormon friend. And then the other thing too is the gospel is a welcome message, and we might not think about that because we've got it in here, and so we just kind of, that's our baseline. So we don't realize almost kind of the desert that people are living in outside of it. But that actually ends up, what I found was that when I share the gospel with other people, that actually works on me too. So there were things, over the course of the week that I went, wow, I don't think I've ever forgiven myself for this. Jesus has, but I haven't. I need to rest in his finished work. And so I would say, even if it's difficult and daunting and you're scared to do it, it's going to have benefits, definitely for you. And I mean, the gospel doesn't go out, without God's power. So it's going to have benefits to the people you're reaching, even if it doesn't look like it. And I guess that's a hard thing for us to wrap our heads around, but let's just give it time, I guess.
Jake, I think there's two things, first of all, a welcome message, folks who are in the desert, and it's not even just Mormons, right? Anyone who's relying, I hope I'm good enough, right, is in a work mentality. And what a message we have. It is finished, the rest that he came to bring. But then I was also struck the way you shared, whenever you share it, you can't help but be impacted personally by that rest for yourself. And I think witnessing is one of those things that, God has a way of coming back around to bless us as well. Mormons, they're struggling, busy as bees. I just want to have our friends remember that our hearts are shaped and best positioned to reach them. We have a course entitled Mormonism's Plan of Salvation that will help you better understand a little bit more about the Mormon mindset and how you might best reach them. You can learn more about that on our website at tilm.org/plan. Jake, I want to thank you again for taking the time, sharing encouragement with God's people. Friends, that's all for today. Go give them.